Welcome to part 2 of the Short-Term Rentals podcast, entitled 2020, the Year of Change. In today's episode, episode 11, we discuss how equal ethnic and gender representation in businesses can drive innovation within the short-term rental sector, the extent to which this year can be a catalyst for change, and what they hope will have been achieved in a year's time in terms of diversity. You can also view part 1 on our website at ShortTermRentalz.com now. We're all in the hospitality sector, and we'd agree that it's very people-centric and driven by a sense of community as well. So what do you think would be the benefits of having an industry where there's equal ethnic, minority and women's rights being respected? And how do you think this would be able to drive change and innovation within the space? Nina, would you like to kick off on this one?
It's not necessarily that it would be change. It would just be, let's live in the reality that we live in. And it's okay. There are a lot of women all over who thrive in a market where, especially in our industry, where we can see each other and help build each other. When I started in the industry in property management, I noticed that a lot of times I would hit that glass ceiling, and it wasn't because of the white men sitting in the corporate rooms, but it was because of my white counterparts that were women who didn't really want to see me succeed. And that's where I kind of felt where I was inclined to actually go to the men and not necessarily the women, because I didn't find that, girl code or camaraderie. So I think that, being able to live in New York for almost 13 years and really see how that melting pot of the world has exposed me to know that it's not just a black and white situation. It's supposed to be cultural. It's supposed to fulfill every aspect of the world if you are going to initially have a global company. But America in itself has its own can of worms. So I think that if we really hone in and acknowledge the situation and have that conversation of how to make the change, we can implement strategies to where it's not just, I'm giving this to you because you're a Black woman, but I'm allowing this opportunity because you're the best candidate and you make sense in that particular role. And it then will allow people to actually educate themselves on more how to be an entrepreneur, because I think a lot of times people just don't have that opportunity, because it took me to actually drive away from what I was being told and educated on how to do that. So I think the diversity of how we could really, make more changes and initiatives is, I think, really listening and understanding who is actually the best candidate, who can actually bring value, and let them look like the clients that you're actually representing so that they feel comfortable with the services that you're providing all around. I think it starts at every level. So from your operations to your guest services, to the person that they're actually doing the tours with, who are your providers of who's setting up your apartments? What type of things can they bring in, and not just this cookie cutter apartment that, most industry people, seek out. What are these other small businesses that are out in these markets that you can help support and, put their brands on the market? So I think there's a wider range of just putting someone in a position, because like Aneesa said, there aren't really those positions right now to be had. So if you can branch out and see who's pivoted into these industries that are making a difference and still servicing and providing a great product, why not take those initiatives to work with them? So I think that's a good input of how we can start.
Thank you, Nina. Is this an opinion that's shared by our other panelists as well? I don't know who'd like to start on that.
I think so. I think she's right. I think one of the things that's important to really, kind of speak on in this space is, right, like the diversity is in, do you walk your talk, right? What do your vendors look like, right? Like even within the companies in which you work for and you work in, right? Like if all of the people of color in your company are your cleaners and that's it, that's telling. I think it's, for me, it's more about, I see it on the level of who are the business owners that support our industry? Like who are the people who support our industry? Great, I get what corporations and companies do, but I think one of the things even Phil said, look, you can't talk about a meritocracy and talk about a level playing field for something that's never been level. Like, let's just be very clear, intentionally been left unlevel. Like, it's not, I mean, that's fact. It was law, then it was pseudo law, and then it was like these pseudo things that happened, but then it was always kind of the status quo. It was always like, all right, well, again, to be at this level, it's you had to be outstanding, right? Like to be, in an executive position and to be, a decision maker within the space, unless you went out and built your own entity, you had to be superb and outstanding amongst all of your peers, right? And that's just, again, how it was. And then we've kind of lived in this society and accepted that that's the way that things have been, not fully agreeing on it, but that's the status quo that I grew up with. Right. And so what I think our industry has the ability to do is to support those who are the business owners, who are the vendors, who are the property management company owners, who, are the tech providers who are in this space. That's where I feel like we can continue to drive diversity and even, again, I think it's knowing of the space, right? Like, you talk about why there aren't African Americans in the vacation rental industry traditionally, because I didn't grow up going on vacations like that. And I wasn't even really aware that this space, like, and Phil said too, like we didn't own homes, one home, let alone a second home or a vacation home. So again, it's part of like, oh yeah, that's nice, but that's for them over there. And not really understanding that this is a business. It's an avenue of business. This is an avenue of prosperity. This is absolutely an industry that we can and should be a part of, for African American and women. And if that's what you look at the root of the word hospitality and what we, when people think hospitality, they think of, oh, great service for everyone, right? And experience for everyone. And the question is that really what we take it to mean through our actions, right? Like it's great to say, hey, it's great people, all these other things, but what do our actions really support? And, as an industry, what do we support?
I think it's been interesting over the last couple of days. We've seen, for example, CEOs like Airbnb's Brian Chesky come out and say that the company should have done so much better, so much more on the matter of diversity. But he now wants to create this more diverse workforce, as well as more positive experience for Black people and travellers. So how does this make you all feel?
I have a relatively strong opinion on the question. Look, so first of all, I think, being a Black person in America right now has, for the past couple of weeks, I guess, since the global outpouring of support for the Black Lives Matter movement, as a resultant from the George Floyd murder, has been a complex emotional time. I'm not a big social media guy. I mean, I use it for work and I'm on my LinkedIn and so on, but I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not getting into arguments or in that nonsense. But for the past couple of weeks, I've been drawn to it like inexorably, right? And I think the reason why is because this is the first time that my diverse network of friends and family and coworkers and so on is paying attention to the same thing that matters to me that I haven't been able to talk about because it's been in polite company, right? Because it's been an issue that has been so personal and so internal to specifically Black people, but other minorities as well in varying degrees for the last couple of decades, right? I mean, the act of officially declaring racism dead and saying we are now all colorblind has made it such that if you say anything, if you have any opinion on racism in a public forum, everyone is immediately offended because no one is a racist because no one sees any color. And racism means people wearing pointy hats and carrying pitchforks. That's not what racism means. Racism is not about burning a cross on someone's lawn. Racism is about giving that guy over there a 0.2% worse mortgage rate so that his son now has $200,000 less dollars when he, 20, 40, 50 years from now. That's what racism is today. Racism is not about burning stuff down or, and so how do I feel about Airbnb's statement that they should have paid more attention to this? Well, great. I just said earlier, look, first, it's let's all pay attention to it so that we know it's there. But these are not new things. These are not new. We've been saying this for a very, very long time. And anyone who really has been open to paying attention to it has been aware of it. I think what's different now is, honestly, I think when we had, when we had a president elected that certain people felt emboldened in terms of expressing, kind of traditionally racist or anti-minority sentiment. I think, a lot of the Black people and the minorities on this call will probably agree. There's a part of all of us that said, this is actually good. Because what you really want is you want people that are racist and you want policies that are racist to out themselves. Because once everyone can see the things that you see because you experience them in your own world every day, people get frustrated by them. They say, wait a second, this has really been going on. And so that's what we see here. We see the world saying, hold on a second, you guys have been doing this to them this whole time? That's terrible. That's terrible. We're not going to stand for this. Because when are you going to do it to us? Or what are the other things that you're doing that we also don't see, right? That's what's leading this impetus. So Airbnb saying that, great. Are these things, we've seen statements from SoftBank and from leading VCs talking about the new focus investments. Are they too small? Are they virtue signaling? Are they, sure, yeah, yes, all of the above. Is it important that they're doing them? Do they create awareness? Are they making it so that we can have this conversation? Yes. So that means, are they positive? Yes. So am I happy about it? Yes. Is it exactly what I wanted? Of course not. But I'm happy that these things are happening because they spawn conversations and they make it possible for us to talk about this, as a community and as an industry.
So we move on to the fifth question. So to what extent do you believe now that can 2020 be this catalyst for change and allow these demographics, those who are less represented in boardrooms, to reach senior positions within their business? Aneesa, did you want to start off on this one?
I think companies are definitely being forced to take accountability for their lack of diversity. Change will take time. There's it's so, the racism is so systemic, and the lack of diversity, even at the mid-manager level, is so poor. There's so many things that need to happen, but as Philip mentioned, the first step is just identifying that there is a problem. So I definitely think it could be a catalyst for change. I hope that, this conversation, continues. It doesn't die down. But, with our industry, it's tough because we're going through such a, challenging time, already, with layoffs and consolidation and companies going under. So, it's hard for us to know when business travel will resume, when travel will resume. So as much as we want to make changes, we want to grow, we want to hire more people and a more diverse workforce, we're not in a position to do that right now, as we're kind of having to shrink our teams.
Back in February, I think it was, I was reading an article on FocusWire about female representation and ethnic diversity within the travel sector. And there was an annual report in there by Women in Hospitality, Travel and Leisure. And it said that female and ethnic minority representation in the most senior roles of travel companies increased over 2019, with female representation going up from 5.3% to 28.9%. However, 84% of those surveyed were not on track to reach 33% female representation, and 15% still had all male boards. Now, at the same time, there were no Black or ethnic minority CEOs, chairs, or senior independent directors in the FTSE 350 HTL companies. So how far do you think the hospitality industry, the short-term rental industry, still have to go with this? Nina, did you want to come in on that?
I think they have a long way to go. It's going to take more of, people like us to actually show people what is required in order to see the change that is needed. It's not waiting for someone to do it, or, this spotlight of this particular person. Look at yourself in the mirror and get out there and do it yourself. So you have to take ownership of your life. Therefore, you have to take ownership of your career. Therefore, you should take ownership of your family, your community, and the responsibility that you have to serve properly. So I think that evolves again within us doing the work. I love what Philip said. Do I like what's going on? No, but did we need it? Absolutely. When I think the Maya Angelou quote is, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. I like to now know who I am dealing with. For so long, we didn't really know, or if we did know, it was taboo to speak about it or talk about it. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're growing your own business and you're doing your own thing and they need your assistance to actually consult and help their teams and their companies grow, it's kind of nice to stand on this side of life. So not only am I representing something that I truly now believe in, but it's starting to show that through my actions and how I'm serving. So I think that corporate America eventually will have to show up in the appropriate manner and the way that their clients deserve, because at the end of the day, hospitality is about the client. So they eventually will have to succumb to certain things that they've been privy to all of their lives through traditions. As Americans, we're so gung-ho on our traditions, but not in the reality of what belief and fact is, which still blows my mind. But I think that's because most people maybe just watch too much reality TV. I don't know. But I think that if we really can foresee how that structure needs to happen and then just do it, that work and how that is being serviced will come. And I think, as I said before, working with these other companies and, furniture and tech and in other departments that actually collaborate universally, it's going to take effect and people will not have that option. Like you can think of like the top 5 companies that people use as far as, furnitures and setups and things of that nature when it comes to corporate housing. Soon, just like Airbnb, it is going to erupt the industry to where you can't really beat them, you got to join them. So I think in lie, when that, innovation does happen, it will just take a sumo effect. So I think that change is inevitable. I just hope to see it sooner rather than later.
Mateo, what's your perspective on that?
I think it's interesting. I think it boils down to one thing. We have to be able to have an open dialogue that's not just us pushing the issue. And we have to also, from our standpoint, is create a space. I think there was a quote that sums up how I feel about it better than, or I think that most people find conflict because, right, they say when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression, right? And so like that's something we have to talk about, right? Like that's what has to be present. Like if we are going to affect change, we have to take away this basic lie that our systemic, like our communities and our culture has been built around, is like, if there's enough for them, there's not enough for me. If there's not, and again, if it's, if you want this myth of the equality to come true, right, and this value to come true, then we have to have dialogue around it. And that dialogue can't be like, I can't give this or work towards this, thinking that I'm working against myself, or I am going to lose something, or I'm going to, it's going to hurt me, when we see that the opposite is actually true. More diverse businesses do better. Look at, and I'll send a presentation. Michelle Williams for BRMA actually has a fantastic presentation that goes in and actually takes the McKinsey data that have researched, do diverse companies do better? They do significantly better. They're more innovative, right? And because of their ability to reach across broad cultures and experiences, their businesses are better off for it. So I think what we need to continue to do is drive the business case, because that's what everyone understands, right? And if we are who we say we are, then our actions should be supporting that 100%. Our resources should be supporting that 100%. It should be seen, not just heard. And I think once we get to that point and it speaks for itself, the progress will also speak for itself. But, you know, I think we can. I think we have a great industry with, like, I do believe in the people within this space and within this industry, and the things that I'm being a part of. Like, I've seen action being put in place. You know, the fact we're having this call, right? You know, it is something that, you know, is progress. Like, you know, had this not happened, and, you know, had these other things not happened, we may not have been having this call. Just, you know, to be 100% honest. So, taking that and really making change from the opportunity that we have is completely up to us.
Philip, I saw you nodding along to a lot of that. What would you like to say?
Yeah, that was really well said. You know, I think you know, I want to touch a little bit on the point that you just made prior about you know, how this can be a year of change, and how that can what groups does that apply to? I think one of the reasons why the Black Lives Matter protest went global so swiftly was because of the change in, I think, our overall mentality about equality and support. That part of that happened via the Me Too movement. I think the Me Too movement shone a lot of light into just how bad things are, and alerted, I think, new groups to becoming active about those sorts of causes. And that's why I think when you see George Floyd protest and you see Black Lives Matter protest, even in completely Caucasian areas, even in areas that are completely, you know, Indian American, or areas that are completely Asian American, I think it's a new spirit of activism, and a new spirit that is demanding change and equality for everyone, not just for people who look like me or look like you, or et cetera. Which I think is actually really great kind of poetic justice, because of how much support African Americans in this country during the civil rights movement gave to other groups when they were going through their own civil rights movements, especially, you know, women's suffrage and so on. And so, so it's to a certain extent come a bit full circle. That's inspiring. That is, it touches me to see that. I mean, one of the most beautiful things that I saw, you know, during when the second week of the protest was, you know, everyone's working remotely right now, obviously, at our company, and we have very flexible, you know, go out during the day, run your errands, do whatever, you know, just check in and say what you're doing. And I remember one day there were just people, you know, AFK going to be at a protest, AFK I'm at a protest, I'm at a rally, I'm at this, or I'm making signs. And these are, you know, these are Caucasian people, they're Filipino people, they're, you know, Indian people. And, you know, that was just beautiful. I've never seen anything like that, because I think people have never, I think there was just the level of awakening and eye-opening, I think is on a different level than it's been in the past. So I am hopeful for change. And I'm hopeful that we, you know, in order to create, you know, true equality, we have to see that the playing field has not been level. And then we have to have those tough conversations about why it hasn't, and what that means, and recognizing, you know, how people have benefited or not from it. So yeah, I'm hopeful, and I'm hopeful, I think, for our industry as well, because we're in a, you know, this is a year of reset for hospitality, for travel in general. When you take a structure and you destabilize it, that creates challenges for incumbents, and it creates opportunities for disruptors. And this is not new. This isn't specific to travel. It's kind of like, look at the, you know, the largest companies in the world today are ones that rose up during the financial crisis and the .com crash. That's where Apple and Microsoft and Google, you know, really started building significant market traction on the tail ends of those. And so similarly here, we've seen the old guard being disrupted in an industry where there was lots of legacy positioning that was race-based because of you know, inability to purchase real estate and so on. And you see new entrepreneurs of every single color, every single race, every single, you know, national origin that are taking the lead. So I'm incredibly optimistic, and you know, and I think that we're, you know, calls like this hopefully are happening in many, many other industries and in many other groups within this industry. And I think conversations and dialogues are happening within individual companies. But it all ultimately comes down to, just making sure you're surrounding yourself with people that have different opinions so you can have the conversation with them. You can't have the change without the conversation. You can't have the conversation with people that have the same background as you. And I think we're starting to do more of that, and that's what makes me feel confident that there can be change.
So that leads me to my sixth and final question for today. So going around each of you, in a year's time, what would you like to have seen change, and what do you hope will have been achieved by this time in 2021 to promote more diversity and inclusion within both hospitality and the short-term rental industry? Aneesa, would you like to kick this one off?
I think there's so much that needs to happen. I think a good indication of if change is happening is just looking at the agenda at an industry event, who's participating on the panels and what are the topics that are being discussed. I think that's a good benchmark for, a year from now. Have we forgotten these topics? Have we forgotten that the panelists all look the same, or are we trying to make a difference? That would be a good benchmark. But in terms of, beyond that, I would just hope that the product itself and the service that we offer is also more inclusive. I think our industry is very traditional, and when you think of the old guard and the product they offer, the user experience, the tech interface, the design aesthetic, it's not really trying to embrace a diverse customer base. So even in the end product, you can see if change is happening there, then it's appealing to more people as well.
Mateo?
I think personally, I would like to see our institutions within the industry, taking active steps to really address the issues, more than just a presentation at an event, but like actually creating task force, actually creating groups that are dedicated to ensuring that the VRMAs don't look the same, that, and I'm sorry, VRMA, I'm not calling you out on purpose. It's just, whatever organization it is actively taking measured steps to get diverse people around to have the conversation to discuss how can we do this better? How can we show we support minority businesses? How can we get more minority businesses within the space? In a previous conversation, someone said, hey, like, why aren't we reaching out to, hospitality schools at these historically Black colleges to get interns and get other things and like get exposure? So it's using the dynamic people, resources, and ideas that we have to actually affect change, to really put it into action. And, don't just set up a committee, but give a committee with a budget that can actually do something. And actually, so when we come back in a year or two, we can say, hey, this is what we've actually done. And hey, it's still early stage or whatever, but look, this is what we're done and doing. And I think that is what I would like to see personally, and to make me feel like we're addressing this not as just a kind of flash in the pan moment of change, but actually what are we doing to show that we're dedicated as an industry to institutional change and serious institutional change by our own hands.
Nina?
I would like to actually see us in general just step out and find more entrepreneurs. I think that this is really a time for us to look at ourselves and just be like, am I with a company that after all of this is going on, are they really going to change? Are they really going to make a difference? Am I going to actually see like I'm value added, and it actually means something, not just in the title on my business card, but also in my bank account. If those things don't add up, then I need to move on and I need to build my own table. So I hope that within a year we see more minority entrepreneurs actually building a foundation that can all of a sudden help and disturb and disrupt this industry in a way that the change that is inevitable to happen becomes more prominent. I would say definitely more current than future, because I think that that's what's needed. I think that there's no reason why you can't do it right now. And it's the same amount of work. It's your name, it's your business, it's your voice. So I think those voices need to be heard on those types of platforms. So I just hope I see a whole bunch of more entrepreneurs at these events next year.
And finally, Philip.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Nina. As someone that's been very entrepreneurial and have kind of been a serial founder over the course of my life, I think that being able to, being in the period in time when people have the most flexibility and ability to go grab resources on their own and create something of value, that's now, right? And that's getting easier and easier and easier every year. So I'm a tremendous proponent of entrepreneurship as a way to kind of get a leg up and do your best to even the playing field. I think that also there are I think some of that change has to come within the organizations that exist within our industry and the organizations that sit outside our industry but impact it very, very significantly, or that have a toe in our industry. When you look at like major OTAs, the Expedias, the Booking.coms, the Airbnbs, obviously industries vertical sector specific, but major OTAs, when you look at the investment, the venture capital funds, when you look at the technology platforms that underpin the services that we build on, like Google and Amazon, right, and Microsoft. I think all of those organizations, what would I like to see a year from now? I'd like to see, I think, yes, the diversity and inclusion task forces are a good step, but I'd like to see senior executives leading just general business roles, right? Not specifically in a role where you're there to try to create diversity within the organization. You create diversity in the organization by making diverse leaders who then will bring other people that are diverse into the organization, because they know the value. As Mateo mentioned earlier, they know that organizations with diverse boards generate on average 19% more in gross revenue a year. And they're aware of that because they've lived their whole lives by creating diversity in organizations, because they bring diversity to the table by virtue of who they are, right? So I'd like to see the change happen on both sides. I'd like corporate leadership to start by looking outside of their existing networks, right? I'd like to see more entrepreneurs of color bringing their own businesses to the table. And of course, this change happens in every single one of us, right? Change isn't just, who passes a law or whether or not there's a protest and you attend it. Change is in who you decide to, take on as a mentee, who you reach out to in your social sector, who do you go have a beer with after the trade show. Like, that is what creates the change. Those are parts of it. It's not the whole thing, but you have to surround yourself with people that are different than you, and you have to actively do that in order to even have the opportunity to create change. So to me, yeah, I'll use the VRMA example, very specific. And the reason why is because I think that is in our industry, incredibly respected legacy organization, and for good reason. But it's also the organization that when you go to the events, and I've spoken at VRMA, I've spoken at Focusrite, I've spoken at the ARDA and so on. Each one of those, not only was I the only Black speaker, but I was one of the few Black people in the auditorium when I was speaking, right? I barely see a Black person in the audience when I'm speaking. I would like to go to those events and see more female executives, more Black female executives, more Black people in general, more people of Indian descent, more people of Asian descent, and just in leadership positions, because they bring value, not because we need to make everything look like the makeup of the company, but because they actually bring value to the organizations. And by keeping them out of those roles and prioritizing more people that look like the people that are currently doing the hiring actually hampers the organizations, right? So I'd like to see a better reflective, diversity within organizations at the top.
Well, thank you very much to Philip, to Nina, Mateo, and Aneesa for joining me today and discussing all of your experiences and thoughts with such honesty and eloquence. And although we can't really simply hope to end racism and sexism within our society just with this podcast, we believe that this should trigger a broader conversation about how the hospitality industry can continue to embrace diversity and work together to ensure that there are equal opportunities for all, at all levels within companies in the short-term rental space. So from me, just a reminder that you can follow all of the latest news, features and opinions from the global short-term rental industry on ShortTermRentalz.com, where you can also sign up to our weekly newsletters, which come out every Monday and now Thursday. Thanks again to all of our speakers, Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.